You're listening to the Forge podcast, and I am Nicole Teist. And today is a continuation of our conversation that we started in the last episode. I hope you'll go back and listen to that. This is about the sexualization of children and what's happening in Delaware. But it's really happening in states across the nation. We just have what seems to be a concentration of this in Delaware, and we want you to know about it. We want you to be informed. And so I have asked to be with us on the show today, Nandi Gamble from Delaware Family Policy Council. And Delaware Family Policy Council is the sponsor of today's episode. And we are so grateful for the work that Nandi has been doing. So some of you know her as Nandi Randolph. She was recently married and became Mrs. Nandi Gamble. And we are just super excited for her and what God is doing and the answer to prayer in her life. But she has been equipping us to walk in courage. And courage is the only way that we are going to push back on this agenda that is happening in Delaware and has been for years. And so let's listen in. And hey, remember to go to show notes, because all of the URLs and the resources that are mentioned will always be in show notes for you to go back to. All right. Thank you for tuning in today. Mrs. Nandi Gamble, thank you so much for being with us today. We're so excited to hear all that you have to share with us. And I know this is going to be more than just one podcast, but I just want to encourage everyone to, whether you have school-age kids, grandkids, you need to know what's happening in the state of Delaware and the prevailing worldview that's driving it. That's what we have to get to the root of. So I want Nandi to talk specifically about some of the things that are going on in the legislature. As we shared there in the intro, that Nandi is policy analyst, directs all things when it comes to keeping an eye on what's going on in the legislature and how it affects families. She's the only one doing this, has incredible systems to be able to help her see what's going on legislatively and what to respond to. And because she is Delaware Family Policy Council, doing this for Delaware Family Policy Council, that Delaware Family Policy Council is connected to other family policy councils across the nation. So we can see and watch and know and monitor what's going on these fronts, like parental rights and life, abortion, marriage, anything that affects the flourishing of family. We can monitor what's going on across the nation. So when we say that this particular policy is going to lead to that particular action, we've been doing this long enough, longer than a lot of the legislators sitting in Delaware. When we say this is what's going to happen, I think we have 100% track record that it happens, right? And we've been doing this for 18 years now. So Nandi is on the forefront here. And we're going to go ahead and just dig into some of this content here. So we heard the last podcast, if you haven't heard it already, from Karen England, and she talked about what we need to be on alert about in libraries and in the school system, the straight pornographic material accessible to minors. And she said something at the beginning where she talked about bodily autonomy. And that's something in working with Nandi that we've seen again and again. I should say, we've heard, because so many legislators reference bodily autonomy as if that is their number one, not as if it is, their number one priority is to advance and protect this concept of self-determination and bodily autonomy above all things. And so I really want to talk about what that means when it comes to minors. And there's so much I know that you have to share with us, Nandi, but what really launched this and why I wanted to have you on is because the whole trans agenda in Delaware being a sanctuary state for that, while I think it's 26 states have banned it altogether. But Delaware is saying, come here, come all. And I mean, we look at the research and we're seeing that this is the biggest medical scandal of all time. And Delaware is saying we're the champions to advance this, right? And to get kids on this pathway of questioning their biology and being at war with their biology for the rest of their lives. And that comes with of course, a huge pharmaceutical little price tag above their head. But we'll get into all of that. But I was reading this article about medical systems restricting parental access to children's medical records under the guise of privacy. And this is what we're seeing in the legislation being proposed regularly in Delaware by those who are very much, I would say, we would refer to them as leftist people. We're not talking about liberals. We're talking about leftists. That's to the left of liberal, where they have they just want to preserve. They don't want to preserve the Constitution. They want to replace the Constitution, right? They want to rewrite it. This is different. We used to be able to have conversations with people who were more liberal. We used to be able to have dialogue, respectful dialogue. They used to care that a lot of people were sending them emails and messages and phone calls about a piece of legislation. That's not what we're dealing with anymore. We're dealing with leftists who are activists, who are in charge of the Delaware legislature. And people need to understand what's going on and no longer abdicate their responsibility to steward government. Government is supposed to be for the good of the people, right? But it's gotten way out of hand because we have just been, well, it could be apathy, all those things. I know that you see it all. So I'm just going to just hand it over to you to talk about some of the things that you have seen and are seeing, and also where we've been successful in pushing back on this. But talking, let's start with just this whole parental rights and focus on the privacy and bodily autonomy of minors. So tell me what you're seeing out there.
That is such a large conversation, Nicole. There's been so many pieces of legislation over the last couple of years that would strip away parental rights, strip away the ability of parents to properly protect and steward their children, favoring this sort of bodily autonomy of minors, and failing to recognize the long-standing history, the understanding that children do not have the ability to make sound decisions on their own, right? That's why we have an age of majority where until you're 18 years old, there's plenty of decisions that you are not allowed to make simply because children can't properly decipher consequences, right? And yet we are allowing them to make such strong decisions on their own. There's a piece of legislation that was proposed a couple of years ago, HB 400, and it was proposed a couple different times. This last time was probably as far as it made it. And this piece of legislation essentially would remove the ability of parents to see the medical decisions made by their children, even though their children are on their insurance. So the parent is paying for the insurance, but it would allow the child to choose any sort of reproductive services or anything that they wanted to without having the parent even notified, which is extremely dangerous, especially given that our public schools have now had an increase of school-based health centers. And these school-based health centers operate off of a very small sort of notice that the parent signs at the beginning of the school year. And that notice is, yes, you can treat my child if they need to be treated, but what are they being treated from?
And for
Right. And if the if the school-based health center has the opportunity or they are already right with the ability to provide reproductive services because they do, that's DHSS regulations, they're allowed to. Then if I as the parent am signing off on that and then my insurance doesn't let me know what has been provided, My child could have gotten puberty blockers, could have gone down the process of gaining a chemical abortion, and I have no notice, right? So we're seeing bills like that that are purposely trying to cut the parent out. We were thankfully able to stop that bill. It did not pass, because there are still some that have. You mentioned earlier the difference between the liberal and the leftist, and there are some that still do have a common sense approach to things like this, that it just does not make sense to completely remove the parent from this conversation,
Yeah.
thankfully.
So
But that's not always the reasoning that we get.
over the years, I remember when we had the debate over these school-based health centers. And I remember when we had a debate over the way that parents are even notified about this.
Mm.
And because we had a parent that brought in a postcard. Actually, I take that back. It was a school board member who brought in a postcard that was in an 8 font, no bigger than a 10 font, explaining just how much access that the school-based health center had to their kid, and just sign here. And we had parents saying, well, the kid takes it out of the backpack or whatever, and we're just, here, mom, sign here so that I can be seen to get a strep test, or strep or get a Tylenol or get my temperature taken or whatever. Oh, no, no, no. School-based health centers are way beyond that. And parents
Absolutely.
need to be aware of what they're signing and read the fine print. Now, back then, we were trying to get it through as an amendment that you had to at least make it a 12 font so people can read it, and I remember it being just a battle over that. But now, fast forward, now in Delaware, every school has to have a school-based health center. And
Mhm.
now all sorts of things are being offered at these things. I was just reading an article about a school over on the West Coast offering puberty blockers, hormones in their school-based health
Yeah.
clinic. Just what you were saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here's what parents need to know. If your kid is in a public school or it's any school, just know what they offer there and know what you're signing and be very aware, because like you were just saying, Nandi, there's been more than one attempt at this piece of legislation to keep parents out so they cannot see if if their kid is getting birth control, and at that school-based clinic, they can refer them to abortions, like you were saying. So parents just need to know what's happening there. Every legislative session, we are seeing attempts like this now in some way or some form that deal with parental rights. Tell us some of the stuff that you saw even just in the last 2 years.
Yeah. So there was a really big one a couple years ago. It was HB 230, and this one was probably one of the most radical that I've seen since being in Delaware. And the bill essentially would give the state what's referred to as emergency jurisdiction over a child that was, quote, unable to obtain gender affirming care. It doesn't specify why they were unable. So, is it unable because of financial reasons, or is it because the parent has a religious conviction that they don't want their child to undergo, this medical transformation?
That's one line.
If,
One
right,
line in
just
this
one
piece of legislation that says unable to obtain. And that
line.
would give the state the authority to take jurisdiction over that minor in the state of Delaware, or if they're coming in from another state, even,
Absolutely,
right?
because it was open to interstate reception of children. It did not prevent that at all. And then within this emergency jurisdiction, the state would then ensure, so they're paying for it essentially with our tax dollars because the government doesn't make revenue. They would pay for that child to then undergo the gender transition process. Now, HB 230 was pulled. It was pulled even prior to having a hearing, but it was replaced by the same sponsor with another bill.
Okay. But
And
it
this
was
other bill,
pulled. It was, I think I remember this now. It was pulled because Delaware Family Policy Council put out an alert about it. and thousands of people responded. And people,
Absolutely.
we were like, you better be heard on this now. When the state is saying they're going to take jurisdiction over a minor, unable to obtain.
Right.
I mean, you open the door to this, and it could lead in so many different directions. So we put out an alert. Thousands of people responded, and thank God that they did, because it made it raised the level of attention and alarm on this. But and then you said the sponsor, okay, pulled that language out, but still went with it
in a different way. That was a little bit more docile, still very problematic. But as you mentioned, we raised the alert. We were on the radio. I even spoke with Tucker Carlson's team when he had his show on Fox, because they wanted information on what is this bill that we're kind of buzzing and hearing about, and what does it do? So being able to give them exactly the notes so they could talk about it as well. I mean, so we were heard on a national level for just how egregious this bill was. The sponsor pulled it and introduced a replacement bill, HB 346, and that bill removed medical liability from medical professionals that were part of the gender transition process. So if a child underwent this process, and we know from all the detransitioners that have been coming out over the years about the intense amount of medical harm that is done to these children, the lack of transparency, of fully understanding the process and the procedure, and the amount of lawsuits that have been going forth. So this bill protects not the minor, not the person that is irrevocably harmed, but the doctor who stands to make a buck from harming someone.
Oh,
protects them
you can
from
hear people
liability.
going, oh, that's just like we heard in testimony in committee hearing. Wow. Let me just say something about committee hearing, because we can talk a lot about this, because Nandi is just scratching the surface here, folks. You've got to tune in and be aware of what's happening. I just want to add here that you should try to listen to committee hearings. While you're doing chores, while you're driving, while you're, prepping dinner, whatever. Listen in to some of these committee hearings. And when we have a big one like this, Delaware Family Policy Council will send out an alert to let you know, so that you can hear for yourself what some of these people are saying, because and this is a whole other thing right here. The sponsor of this bill, all right, is an activist for, okay, this person has 4 sons and is transitioning 3? 2? Okay.
2 for sure that I know.
Okay. Well, when you want to, you should listen in the committee hearings, okay? We will alert you, send you a notification in your text. If you sign up, go to delawarefamilies.org/updates. We'll put it in show notes for you. You go there, you sign up, make sure you put in your cell phone. We don't abuse that. It's private. And then you will get an alert about what's happening, and listen to these hearings. Listen to what people say. When this was being heard, they brought in doctors from Christiana, from the Nemours Children Gender Clinic, right? Nemours has that. And so you need to hear what they're saying and understand what we're dealing with here. Now, that sponsor, what is the sponsor's name?
Deshauna Neal.
Yeah, okay.
Representative Deshauna.
She's a representative now. Before, she was a representative. And back in 2017, I was standing in Walgreens line. I look over to the magazines, and there's a National Geographic there that says, that started talking about the gender war. And it had this young person on the front of it who was born a little boy and dressed like a little girl. And I opened it up, and in the centerfold of that National Geographic 2017 was Deshauna Neal with, at that point, I think, definitely a child, maybe not even 12 years old, maybe even younger. Much younger. Whole centerfold where the doctor says, do you want a dead son or an alive daughter? Which we know is the biggest lie. That's being exposed all over the place now. But that's the decision based on that from the pediatrician, this woman made a decision to transition a child on the spectrum, and Delaware paid for it. And that was also listed in the caption. Back in 2017, folks, this agenda has been at play for almost a decade now. And so, again, we need you to wake up to understand how this affects parental rights, how this affects education. And we'll have Nandi on talk about it some more. But why don't you close with telling us about this, the intersection now of comprehensive sex ed, which our last guest, Karen England, talked about, with what is meant by comprehensive sex ed and how that is mandated now in Delaware schools.
Mm-hmm. Comprehensive sex ed is, as you mentioned, it's mandated in Delaware through Regulation 851. And that regulation is from literally kindergarten all the way through 12th grade.
And what is comprehensive sex ed how you understand it to mean?
And the understanding of what that is this is not just your typical, understanding of puberty, reproduction as we got it when we were younger. This is much more expansive. This is a focus on sexuality and pleasure. This is including the DEI benchmarks that they have to make, the diversity, equity, and inclusion that include LGBTQIA plus references on, and I don't want to be too crass in the explanation, but explaining sexual procedures to children.
Practices.
Both practices for heterosexual and homosexual sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that
everything
happens again,
in between.
Mm-hmm. Everything in between.
Yeah. I mean, there were things mentioned that I honestly, I verbiage, I'm like, what in the world does that mean? And right. I'd have to look it up, and I could not believe that they think that this is what they should be teaching kids. How to safely do that? Are you kidding me right now? People need to be really upset by this and on alert to who they are exposing, allowing their kids to be exposed to.
Right. And that comprehensive sex ed is one at the curriculum level, because again, it is a benchmark. One of the state standards required in the state of Delaware for our students. So it's at the curriculum level, but it's also at the library level now, right? Especially since the passage of HB 119, the so-called Freedom to Read Act. The question is the freedom to read what? What books are we saying that our children should have access to?
They said all of them, right? They were like,
exactly.
Don't keep any of them. Don't, because that would be book banning.
Right. And we don't want to hinder their exploration, hinder their bodily sexual autonomy that we talked about earlier. Thankfully, we were able to have an amendment placed in HB 119 that softened its blow, and it simply reminded the state of a current piece of Delaware code that exists that criminalizes the production of obscene material to minors, right? So that is still in place. So it says, yes, they have the freedom to read. Books are not to be automatically banned, but hey, don't forget obscene material provided to minors is a criminal offense. And with that, if we do come across sexually explicit material, this obscene material that we're referring to, we can say, okay, this one needs to come off the shelves for minors.
And Karen told us how to do that. That's right. She used the verbiage pervasively vulgar. That's listed. That was referenced in a Supreme Court hearing. But I just need to go back and say, folks, Nandi fought hard on this. It was amended. As it was going to go through, that language was not there. And Nandi, thank you for sounding the alarm to go, hold up. You need to know what this really means. So this is all a part of the sexualization of children. And it is real. And it's coming from this worldview of bodily autonomy. I'm going to say it, the worship of self. Being expressed as bodily autonomy as the highest priority. Would you agree with that?
I would 100% agree with that. And we can see even through scripture that that is a symptom of the last days. Men will be lovers of themselves. And this is exactly what they're pushing for, that bodily autonomy, lover of self.
At all costs.
And my pleasure is the greatest height, right? And that should be not just for adults, but also for minors. And that's where some of the greatest dangers come from, because who's protecting these minors? Especially if we are preventing parents from doing that.
Yeah.
We're opening them up to a world that they cannot adequately decipher through on their own.
So we're going to talk more about this, but there is a campaign going on right now where people can be heard and get involved. We mentioned before that Nemours has been the gender clinic in Delaware, and because of the Trump administration's pressure, Nemours said they're not taking on any more patients. Well, then Delaware's Attorney General, Kathleen Jennings, decided to write the president CEO, I guess of Nemours, a letter saying, no, keep your doors open. You need to see these, you need to see these minors, these children who need gender affirming care, whatever that is, right? You can talk a little bit about that as well, but what should people do now? Tell us about the campaign.
Yeah, the campaign, exactly as you mentioned, is to help Nemours find the strength to hold the line. They made that statement to say that there would be no new patients, which I have to mention in a hearing that that we saw this year, SB 55, that was produced by a very consistent and courageous legislator. The pushback that he got back from this bill that would stop gender mutilation for minors, one of the comments was that this is not happening in Delaware. Now, if it's not happening in Delaware, then why would Nemours say no new patients?
And why would Kathleen Jennings write a letter saying,
right,
keep your doors open?
So, complete blatant lie in order to shut down the strength of the argument that was presented that day, to try and make it sound nonsensical. But it's absolutely happening in Delaware. And that's why Nemours, in their effort to listen to the Trump administration, they said, you know what, we're going to not accept any new patients. Our campaign is to, again, help ensure that Nemours holds that line, that they continue to not take new patients, to not harm any more minors than have already been harmed by these practices. We can see the CAS report. I believe that you mentioned that, which is basically a study from the UK that just came out. It's 388 pages. The information presented in this report is outstanding. The evidence for the safety and efficacy of gender transitions is beyond weak. Weak is not the word that I could provide. After all of the studies, the best course of action that has been found for children that have gender dysphoria has been counseling. It has been the non-medical procedures, but that's been banned here in Delaware.
That's right. They call that conversion therapy. Right.
Absolutely.
Again, we're always looking at the way they're defining words. And you think that might mean one thing, but then you look at the bill language and it's like, no, they've banned even talk therapy. Like, okay, so fine. If there was some kind of wild, antiquated procedure, ban the procedure, ban that. Don't ban counseling, but they did. They did. And so now they introduce these ideas to kids, as early as 4 and 5 years old, that you can question your gender. And to what end, right? To what end? Taking them to puberty blockers and then cross-sex hormones, and then they amputate perfectly healthy body parts. Hey, just a little bit of homework for folks listening. It's really important. Just go to YouTube and put in the search bar detransitioners or change regret and see what floods your feed, because so many of these 20-something young people are coming out and really trying to sue, as they should, the people in the medical establishment who did not give them counseling and let them do this to their bodies and have they can't, they know. Help me, Nandi. I'm so overwhelmed by this because it really, really gets me. But irrevocable harm it has done, this entire agenda. There's another thing I think I've seen so many times: transition justice. Is that what it's called? On social media, they have loads of it, of people coming forward, brave, courageous people. So many of them saying, "Hear us! Stop doing this." And Delaware is saying, "Come all. We are the sanctuary state for transing your kids." So, okay, if people want to be heard on this and want to encourage no mores, hey, hold the line, don't do this, rethink this, please. Where can they be heard on this?
Well, that's directly from our petition, and we'll have the link. We'll have to put that in the show notes.
Okay.
The DelawareFamilies.org.
DelawareFamilies.org. You know what? It's / defend our kids. If you want to go to it directly now, it's defend our kids. But DelawareFamilies.org is always going to have the stuff there. If you put in your phone number, you'll get the push notification. And that's something that you want to share with a lot of people. Now, that campaign's still going, but it's Nandi working behind the scenes, working up front with the team at Delaware Family Policy Council that is putting that information together and collecting it. Been collecting it, monitoring it for years now. And so we encourage everyone, please go there, know what's going on. And I will say this, we get feedback all the time from people saying, thank you for making this so easy. Okay, it's not going to take long. You can do this in 3 to 5 minutes. Put the kids down, go at night, check it out, DelawareFamilies.org, and be heard and get involved. And you know what? I just want to add to this. Delaware, we call it DFPC, okay, Delaware Family Policy Council, is not a political organization. We are a biblical worldview organization and care deeply about elevating the family and God's plan for human flourishing. And so, but there is a reality to this, that this agenda is being pushed by the Democrat activist legislators in the Delaware legislature. That's the fact of the matter. And so when somebody runs for office, you need to know what questions to ask them and know what's going on enough. And I think if you can get connected at DelawareFamilies.org, you're going to know better, be informed so that you can ask these questions of people who are running. Thank God for those who want to run for office. And when they do, I know they're so appreciative of the work that you're doing, Nandi, to see, to analyze, and to inform so many about what this legislature really means, legislation that they're seeing. So any thoughts that you would like to close with, Nandi, before we let you go?
Yeah, just the last couple of things I wanted to kind of leave out on somewhat of a happier note.
Thank you.
Which I know is difficult in this conversation, but we're seeing 2 major Supreme Court cases that would completely work in our favor. One of them, which has already been decided, and that's Malmo versus Taylor. That was decided earlier this year, and that allows parents to exercise their parental rights and opt their children out.
Yes, everybody, opt out. Yes.
And there's wonderful forms that have been done by defendinged.org, and we have those also present on our site as well, but they can opt out of this comprehensive sexual education that we're talking about, making sure that they protect their children preemptively, right? Then there's another case that was just heard. The oral arguments just happened earlier this month, and that's for Childs versus Salazar. And that case is about conversion therapy. It's a Colorado health counselor that's saying, hey, my inability to freely speak to my patients not only hurts them, but also hinders my First Amendment right. to speech. And that's, again, currently being decided. So we're going to keep our eyes on that, continue to pray for that one. Because if that goes forward, then that conversion therapy ban in Delaware would be completely overturned, right? SB 65 would be no more, and parents could take their children to counseling safely, make sure that they get the help that they need, and actually speak through the gender issues that they're having and not just be put on puberty blockers and shut down, which we know is not effective. So those are two cases that I think we definitely need to continue to pray for. Again, Malmu versus Taylor was already decided. So yes, you can opt your children out, but Childs versus Salazar is still on the fence. We're still waiting to hear, and we'll be anxiously awaiting that opinion.
Yes. Those cases were able to move forward because of courage. The Mahmoud versus Taylor happened right at a neighboring state in Maryland because parents got together and they pushed back. Now, in Delaware, we have tried for opt-out several times, and we heard all the same objections, we have to serve all families, and this is going to affect, I could go on and on about that. But those same objections were heard in this case, and these courageous parents are challenging it. They challenged it. They came together. It was heard just this past June, right? Then that decision was made. Parents take advantage of it. And I'm just praise God for the bravery and the courage of that counselor, Childs, who came forward to challenge it. That will override, like you said, this horrendous legislation in Delaware. So that is, and you know what else? As looking back at the history of so much of this, there have been some things, some awful things, like you've mentioned, that have been proposed that because people by the thousands took action, we were able to push back on it. And it pops up in other ways, but I thank God that you have been there to watch and to warn and to inform. I praise God for you, Nandi. And I know that you'll be back again. Legislative session starts in January, and we need everybody kind of alert and ready and listening in. So I just want to say thank God. We thank God for you, and God bless you for what you're doing and just being a part of this team and serving Delaware.
Thanks, Nicole.
Well, we hope that you found that to be very informative. And if you want more information about everything that we talked about in that episode with Nandi Gamble, make sure you go to show notes. That's where we have all the resources listed. Be sure to go to delawarefamilies.org/defend our kids so that you too can take action on this campaign that we have right now to encourage Nemours to not reopen the clinic that they're operating. So learn more about that at delawarefamilies.org/defend our kids. We're so appreciative for the work that Nandi Gamble is doing. And when you're at the website, you can sign up for updates so that you can get those texts, those notifications when there's an alert, where there's a committee hearing for you to tune into. They are very informative and educational, and we recommend those committee hearings with your teens to really analyze with your teens what worldview is this person speaking from. And we'll continue to put information there for you in show notes to help your diet of information. And the more that you do that, you take just a little bit of time to check those resources out, the easier it gets to distill this information so that you can turn it into action. But I'm very encouraged. I'm very encouraged by the courage. Does that make sense? I'm encouraged by the courage that people are making their stand, operating in to push back on this agenda. Praise God for that. And it's amazing what one person can do when they are equipped, strategically placed to take territory. Remember, a win is when truth is advanced. Go win.